Hey friends, welcome back. So in today's video, I'm going to be getting in 3 sessions and discussing the new Create Originals CRS frames. So day 1, I am at the League City skate park. It's like 95% humidity, and because of how humid it is, the entire skate park is covered in like dew. And all the transition ramps are covered in paint, so it's super slick. So I've just been hitting like a lower sea ledge, and it's finally drying out, but I'm kind of tired because of how many tries it took me to do everything just because of sliding around. So I may hit just a couple things and then call it a day, and then just recap my experience on day 1. So the most notable difference between the new CRS frames and the traditional Create frames is just the shock absorption system. So basically what it is you have this aluminum spacer that plugs on the inside of the frame, and then you have a oblong shaped rubber washer essentially that pushes into a cutout within the frame. And then, that compresses into the backside of the spacer and then is really just held in place with the frame bolt. And as you land, the axle wants to push up, and then so you have this rubber washer that resists, basically the ability for that axle to move upward, and results in, the shock absorbing system. So one feature that is a little different with the CRS frames is that it has these knobs on the front and the back of the skate when you compare it to the original Create Originals, which is pretty flat. And this is very similar to like the juice bumps on 50/50 balance frames. So I'm curious to see how that's going to ride. Another difference along the frame is you can see that there's not a cutout for basically the window like traditional Create frames, where you have the plastic shield and then you can put in different cutouts, stickers, whatever you want. So it's basically not really any customization ability to this, but in my opinion, I think it looks really good. All right, so let's talk about the first session with the CRS frames. First off, they felt very familiar to the Create Originals because of the H block. I honestly didn't really notice the extra 5mm ride height. The thing that was throwing me off on top sides were these juice bumps, and it's like raised just enough that when I lay my foot down like on the ledge, it basically allows it to slide past the sole plate, and I slipped out on my top horns. So I think I'm gonna have to wear those in a little more before top horns really feel good. But I mean, this is an old park, it's on the coast, nothing is waxed very well. So, combined with the ground being just completely wet today too, everything was just a little bit extra of a struggle. As far as shock absorption in these, it did feel dampened, but I wouldn't say that it was such a significant difference. Might be different if you ride flat, because you get more of that absorption. I didn't really notice it too crazy, but it does make a nice, clean, like dull thud landing sound. So that's really nice. But you know, just a little bit extra, you know, that always helps too. One thing that you know, I don't know that I would be man, Texas, everybody wants to be the loudest person in the room. Yeah, so what I was saying is with the frames, I don't know that I trust myself skating these flat, because I feel like I would get crazy wheel bite just based on how I put my feet on ledges. But I'm gonna give it a couple more sessions. The one thing that I thought is kind of interesting too is, you know, when I put these in, the frame bolts were at the bottom of the frame, but after just like one session skating these, you can see a little bit of a gap between the frame bolt and basically the end of the spacer bushing. So kind of makes me wonder how long these spacers will last with competitive like repetitive landing cycles. But overall, you know, plastic felt very familiar. They definitely did feel a little stiffer. Didn't really notice any weight issues, but I typically don't, even though these frames are heavier than the classics just because of all the additional hardware and bridging and thicker wall plastic at the base. But yeah, overall it was, you know, a good time. Can I say it's worth the price point at this point? I'm not sure. You know, it definitely gave some additional dampening, but you know, the biggest downside for me is that it really took away from being able to do some top sides, so that is gonna take some time to break in. But yeah, that's day one, and you know, we'll rest up and hit day two tomorrow. All right, day two, I'm at the Alvin, Texas skate park on the CRS frames. I did misspeak yesterday when I said that the bushings appeared to have compressed some because there was a gap. So that's how they come, because the hole is not quite centered, but it's just a little bit above the bottom. So yeah, so I misspoke about that. I just remembered wrong. All right, one thing I noticed with the Create frame, and this makes sense to me, is because you have the shock absorption system in there, it means that the frame needs to be a little taller. So I took some measurements last night when I was getting these set up, and the new Create Original frame, the CRS, is 5 millimeters taller than the traditional Create frame. So, you know, you can see that it's kind of recessed in the sole plate here, but if I stack it up, you know, it basically aligns perfectly. So, you know, that kind of helps get the, I don't know, depiction across that, you know, you've got a taller frame, but I believe that, no, so it is like about 5 millimeters taller of a ride height as well. So a little bit taller of a frame, a little bit taller of a ride height. So the next thing I wanted to share with you all is just kind of a change to the H block. So if you can see, the new CRS frames have basically cross bridging, and then you can see that they actually have larger wheel wells in the CRS. And so what that means is like how they accomplish that, because I believe the CRS, you can ride up to 60 millimeter wheels flat. And on Create Originals, you have to use smaller wheels, because otherwise what happens is it like fouls with the H block. So you can see that the H block on the CRS is actually narrower than on the traditional frame. But it does feel like the radius of the groove and the sidewalls is very similar. Honestly, these don't have barely any like wheel bite protection, so supposedly these frames are supposed to be really good if you ride them anti-rocker. So what I want to do is try them out anti-rocker, get a feel for them, and see how they skate before I even consider putting flat wheel setup on it. Just because, like, getting wheel bite sucks and I hate it and it's not for me. So, hopefully this is really good setup. All right, well, that wraps up day 2. Frames are feeling a lot better than day 1 just because they're breaking in. I was getting top sides a lot easier today, so that's good. As far as shock absorption goes, you definitely feel like improved shock absorption, basically. So I think that's feeling good. It doesn't feel super squishy like on transition, which I heard was a problem with like the first like Kickstarter version they had, just because of how soft the spacers were. So that's good. I think that's going to be a long-term like observation, is just see how much the rubber spacers, polyurethane spacers, actually like soften up over time. But so far these frames are good. Like, there's no rattling parts, they're nice and solid. In addition to it absorbing impact, it's also absorbing sound, so it's making for like a very nice clean landing. Weight, don't really notice any weight issues. Yeah, so liking them. Love the color on them too, man. These are so sick. Still not convinced that I would enjoy these flat, just because they do feel like a little taller of a traditional Create Originals frame. And I feel like because that H block is just a little narrower too, it just means that I'm not feeling as good and confident in my grinds. So, once I break those in a little more, I think they're gonna be perfect. But yeah, don't feel like flat on these is going to be for me. But yeah, I think that's my thoughts on day 2, and rest up and we'll get back to it tomorrow. All right, day 3 on the Create Original CRS frames. Today I'm at the Texas City Skate Park. Let's get laced up and get to it. Tropical skating. Everything is rusty, covered in dew. So one thing to mention with the rubber spacers that go inside the frame is they come in 2 different hardnesses. The black is supposed to be for anyone who weighs like 150 pounds and up, and then they have a white version for anybody under 140 pounds. So that's one thing I really want to see as I skate these, is how are those basically rubber washers holding up, and is it good for riding anti-rocker like what Create Original says it is. one other thing that I want to point out too is because the H-block got chopped down a little bit, the middle wheel axles are pushed in a little more, so you end up with kind of a narrower wheel spacing in the middle too on the CRS compared to the traditional Create frames. All right, well, that wraps up day 3 on the Create Original CRS frames. My knee was hurting at the very end. Not because of the frames, but because I skated 3 days in a row really hard on them filming this video. So I just decided to call it because I didn't want to push it. But let's go ahead and talk about what are my thoughts. So first off, shock absorption. Feels really good. Riding the black spacers, meant for the heavier rider, which I fall under. And I went back, looked at the Create Originals website because I was curious what they said about the spacers. And they do mention that you will need to replace these. Doesn't really say when, but I assume it's when you notice that they start getting really like soft and squishy, and you probably lose some responsiveness. But replacement spacers I think are right around 40 bucks plus shipping. So really enjoying them with anti-rocker frames. Because of the narrower H-block and because of how taller it is, I still don't think I'm gonna enjoy these flat. Just because of the way that I position myself on ledges and there's no wheel bite protection, I'm not convinced that I'm gonna enjoy that. So I don't know if I'm gonna try it or not. We'll see, maybe after I get them broken in, but the more they break in, the more chance you have for wheel bite too, because it's gonna leave more of the wheel exposed just as you wear down the plastic. Material on these, they slide really well. I was skating a lot of like rusty, unwaxed steel, where you could tell it hadn't been waxed in a long time. And in my 3 sessions, I used 3 full bars of wax. So if that gives you an indicator of like how much it took to like slide. But even then on some things I was just sticking, but I think that's more due to these just aren't frequently skated versus the frame. The sole tricks, the notch outs, I didn't really notice a difference when I'm on regular soles. When I was doing top horns is when I seemed to notice it the most, but as I broke them in some more, I was getting them a lot easier and without like slipping out and like bypassing the sole plate. So that's easy fix. Slightly taller ride height, slightly different H-block does make tricks feel a little different initially, but once that's breaking in, it is feeling normal. So absolutely having a good time on these and gonna continue to skate them. So yeah, and man, I love this color too. That is a good looking set of frames. I like them. So with the spacers, I think they're good. I think they supplement good shock absorber inside the skate. I'm not convinced that they fully replace the need for like a heel shock absorber. That's just kind of my 2 cents, because I noticed when I was taking some bigger drops, that would have irritated my knee a little more. But I did feel nice and solid with the landings, and I didn't really like slip out from squishiness on transitions. But yeah, I'm not convinced that this replaces a shock absorber. I think it's a good supplement if you need a little more short shock absorption in your skate setup. All right, well, that wraps up 3 days on the Create Originals CRS frames. You know, if you got any questions, comments, feel free to drop me a line. I'll do my best to get back to you. Thank you all for checking in. We'll catch you next time.